Hello everyone, this is Becky, and I'm here to explain to you one of the activities we would like you to do this week. This activity is to collect data in your classroom. The purpose of collecting this data is to get a baseline of things that are going on in your class, specifically related to your students who might be in trauma. You will probably collect data on all of your students, but not necessarily. That is up to you. You'll use this data in your post next week and in your first assignment, which is called the classroom context assignment. This data is not going to be scientific. After all, your students are not from a random sample and you do not have a controlled environment. You have a classroom. But that can be a good thing. Your classroom is your environment and it is where you practice your expertise. It's where you and your students live every day. So you are going to collect data in that environment. You have a lot of choices for this activity. You might want to collect data for one class, or if you teach many classes in a day, for all of your classes. If you are a principal, you might be collecting data in the hallway or regarding students in your office. Perhaps, for any of you, you want to collect data on just a few students about whom you are concerned. That's fine. Notice, we are not going to ask students to identify ACEs or to tell us if they think they are in trauma. That is not appropriate in this setting or activity. Here are some examples. Maybe you want to measure your students' ability to take responsibility for their learning. Students who are experiencing trauma may struggle with this. I think we all know that other students might struggle with this for other reasons, but it might also be the case for your students with trauma. So you could survey your students. You could ask all of your students to respond to a few questions, such as the ones that I have here. For example, in the past month in this class, I came with prepared with needed materials never or almost never, some of the time, regularly, frequently, always or almost always. You could ask your students to circle one of these options. The other two that I thought of were, did the students complete their assigned homework in the last month? And then again, the same options. Or students stayed focused. You could say that's in one class or in the last month. Never, some, regularly, frequently, always. I highly recommend that if you give a student survey, you not have more than 5 questions. 3 to 5 questions is plenty. You might want to know more things, but they will get survey fatigue, which means that they'll stop paying attention to the questions as much, and they might just circle everything down the middle or on one end or the other. It might be that you want to just measure these questions yourself, maybe for a week. So you could note these things about your students. You could note how many came prepared or didn't, how many did their homework or didn't, and your perception of how focused students were. I think a chart like this would be fine for you to take that kind of data. And obviously it doesn't need to be typed. You could make such a chart by hand. So here I had 5 days, the number of students who were prepared for class and the number not. And if I can't notice exactly, I might have to estimate. Again, it's not a scientific study. Here's some fake data. I said I had a class of 21. That would have been about the smallest class I ever had. But 16 came prepared and 5 did not. So that was a rate of 76% of students prepared. Homework done and not, that was a little bit lower in my fake classroom. And then for student focus level, this was very subjective. I just chose some words to describe how I might describe my students' focus level, and then I used one of them, in this case, average. You might choose to do something different, and that's fine. You might be more interested in looking at student behavior. Think about some things you see regularly in your class. Would it be helpful to tally those? In my high school classroom, I probably would have looked for the following. And again, I have some fake data for the first couple of days. Sometimes I would have student outbursts, like a student saying something off topic loudly at an inappropriate time. So I might tally every time that happens. And maybe this is 3 by the same student, or maybe this is 3 different students. You might want to decide one way or the other. Just make sure you're consistent the whole time. Much less commonly, but sometimes I would have students use inappropriate language. And much more commonly, I might have a student who is obviously off task. Maybe they were out of their seat and going somewhere they shouldn't go. I tried to have times that my students could walk, but there were times that they needed to be in their seats. For some of them, that was challenging. So in my fake data, I said that I had 10 times that students were obviously off task, and that 3 of these were the same student at different times. That would have been common in my class for sure. Now, I chose all negative behaviors, and we want to avoid a deficit view of our students. What I mean by that is we want to think about the positive things they bring to our classroom, not just the things that might be disruptive or negative. So you can collect positive data instead. However, if you're thinking about getting a sense of students who might be acting out because they're in trauma, you might be looking for trauma type behaviors. Behaviors that might be exhibited by a student who is traumatized. So that depends. Think about what we read in the first couple of chapters. Think about what you see in your classroom and collect data on that. We will certainly spend a lot of time talking about deficit mindsets and how we want to be positive about our students. As you're collecting your data, and this is not required, but you might also want to journal about the class period or the day. That's totally up to you. It just gives a little more context. If you had a really rough day, maybe it's because you had a terrible weather day, like a 2-hour delay from snow or something. Just be sure to keep your data organized and that you don't lose it. Also, keep it simple. Please don't try to collect data on every single thing for every single class. It will take too much time and energy, and you will never want to collect data again. Teacher research, and really all research, needs to be attainable, or you will give up. So, make sure that you make this something that you can do while still being an effective teacher in your classroom, of course. And as always, let us know if you have any questions. Thanks, everyone.